Welcome to today's Emerging Trends and Technologies to Advance TSMO Programs webinar. I'm Nick Ramphos. I'm the Director of the National Operations Center of Excellence, or NOCO. This webinar is being recorded. A recording will be shared on our YouTube page and newsletter and will be available on the website within the coming week. To get the recording, please follow us on YouTube and register for our newsletter. All participants will be muted throughout. Please use the Q&A box on your Zoom toolbar for any questions for the presenters. For general questions for NOCO or anything else, please use the chat box. This webinar has closed captioning and transcription options as well. Access to those are also on your Zoom toolbar. Before we begin, I just want to thank all of you who are joining us today. Today's webinar is co-sponsored with the Federal Highway Administration's Office of Operations. And just as a disclaimer, this presentation was created and is being co-presented by both a Federal Highway and an outside entity, and the views and opinions expressed in this presentation are the presenters and do not necessarily reflect those of Federal Highway or the U.S. DOT. The contents do not necessarily reflect the official policy of the U.S. DOT. The U.S. government does not endorse products or manufacturers. Trademarks or manufacturers' names appear in this presentation only because they are considered essential to the objective of the presentation. They are included for informational purposes only and are not intended to reflect a preference, approval, or endorsement of any one product or entity. Except for the statutes and regulations cited, the contents of this presentation do not have the force and effect of law and are not meant to bind the states or the public in any way. This presentation is intended only to provide information regarding existing requirements under the law or agency policies. Unless otherwise stated, Federal Highway is the source of all images in this presentation. And with that, I would like to turn things over to Joe Gregory with Federal Highway's Office of Operations. Joe?
All right, thanks, Nick. Just kind of go over a couple of slides before we really start kicking things off. But I just want to start off with maybe a couple of poll questions. If you can bring the first one up. So we just want to get a sense of the audience in terms of what agencies you represent first and foremost. So we'll give you a couple minutes, or we'll give you like about 30 seconds or so to answer. Okay, give you a couple more seconds. Okay. All right, thanks. So let's go to the next one. Next polling question. This one is to what extent does your TSMO program account for emerging trends, technologies, and services? And if you see the blue box on the right, it gives you some examples of each in terms of what we're going to cover today. So I'll give you about 30 seconds for that. All right, give you a couple more seconds. All right, thank you. So those are the polling questions we have right now, and you'll see, looking at it, there seems to be a bit of quite a bit of diversity in terms of their experience in integrating emerging trends, technology, and services in TSMO, which is good. So this I'm hoping this will be a very productive webinar for everybody. But before I turn this over to Carrie Snyder from ICF, I just want to go over the agenda real quick. So a little bit of background. This is an FHWA products that are going through our final review process right now. So we're hoping to release them soon. But we're going to go over what we call a playbook for integrating emerging trends, technologies, and services into TSMO, particularly how agencies, state and local agencies can integrate that to advance in their capabilities in the overall TSMO program. And then we're going to highlight a couple of examples. We have some peer presenters, one from the city of Bellevue in Bellevue, Washington, on their real-time signal safety intervention system, and then TriMet out of the Portland, Oregon area on their next generation transit signal priority. And then we're going to set aside some time for Q&A as well. So I believe Nick already said this, but if you have any questions during the presentations, go ahead and enter it in the Q&A function of the Zoom webinar. So again, thank you for joining us, and then I'll turn over to Carrie.
Thanks, Joe. My name is Carrie Snyder, and I'm a Principal Transportation Planner with ICF, leading the contractor team supporting FHWA in this effort. As Joe noted today, we are going to talk about the playbook for integrating emerging trends, technologies, and services into TSMO programs. TSMO practices have evolved significantly from the early approaches in the 1990s to today, really mirroring the innovations in communications, vehicle and consumer technology, traveler behavior and preferences, as well as data analytics. The continued value and evolution of TSMO really rests on the ability to evaluate and incorporate emerging technologies and trends that create new services, capabilities, and applications for transportation users and agencies. Emerging technologies and trends can create these new services, and evaluating those and incorporating those into the TSMO programs, agencies can increase the overall effectiveness of their TSMO efforts. And on the flip side of that, when agencies are faced with emerging trends and technologies that enter their sphere of influence, but maybe are not implemented by them, they can make sure that their TSMO programs are agile enough to work with these technologies that come their way. So there are a whole host of emerging trends, technologies, and services with the potential opportunities to reduce congestion, enhance safety, and improve decision making. Next slide, please. Some examples of those are planned initiatives that build upon existing ETTS, including improving vehicle detection capabilities, using technologies like Bluetooth and radar, upgrading communications infrastructure to address anticipated needs of connected vehicles, smart city initiatives, data transfers, exploring technologies to apply active traffic management strategies on urban freeways, and deploying arterial traffic management systems like adaptive signals and traffic response capabilities, as well as transit signal priority. So the FHWA has created a new playbook to equip transportation practitioners with an approach to anticipate, adapt to, and leverage innovations and shifts in these emerging technologies, trends, and services to advance their TSMO programs. The playbook is organized into 4 context areas: planning and program, institutional, systems, and operations. Within the playbook, each of these context areas contains plays and examples. We'll talk about a few of those today. And as suggested by the cyclical flow of the figure, the playbook really reflects a continuous and iterative process of improvement. Practitioners can use findings from one context area to help inform activities or choices in other areas. And they can also use lessons learned from deployed emerging trends, technologies, and services to inform and integrate TSMO recommendations across all 4 context areas. So why would you want to use this playbook, or how would you come to need this playbook? So there are several motivations. For example, exploratory, and maybe an agency is interested in the potential of a particular emerging technology, trend, or service, and they're looking for support on how to approach the implementation into its and integration into its TSMO program. Perhaps an agency is coming off of a recent deployment and is looking to apply lessons learned from that experience to either extend the rollout of this what was deployed or enhance the TSMO program to better support future pilot deployments. Perhaps a region is interested in attracting and fostering economic development and focusing on innovations related to access, mobility, and safety. Maybe a region is experiencing a proliferation of emerging technologies and trends, whether it's commercial shared mobility services, and they're looking for how to respond. From a funding opportunity, maybe there's a grant out there that you all are looking to capitalize on and want to make sure that your operations and safety programs are aligned with this opportunity. And finally, maybe your agency is working on developing or updating its TSMO program plan or strategic plan, and you want to think about it in a way that is forward-looking and supportive of emerging trends, technologies, and services. So now we'll get into some of the plays in each of the program contexts. So as you can see, these are the three plays focused on checking alignment between a given emerging trend, technology, or service and your program goals, collaboration with stakeholders to understanding what they need, and exploring potential risks and external factors. Some examples that are discussed in the playbook here are examples of the Atlanta Regional Commission and the way that they use their TSMO strategic plan and their use of the Georgia DOT Navigator deployment of advanced transportation management system applications to support their goals of enhancing system reliability. Another example is Maricopa County in the way that they conduct scenario planning with their stakeholders to whittle down the set of emerging technologies and trends to carry forward in their transportation system plan. And finally, another example on looking at risks and external impacts. Seattle DOT's new mobility playbook is highlighted, specifically identifying the risks of automated vehicle ride-hailing services and how that could increase congestion in their central business district. Moving on to the institutional context, we're talking about developing a business rationale, confirming roles and responsibilities both within a given transportation agency as well as focused on collaborating with external stakeholders, and then identifying a realistic path to procurement. One of the issues with these emerging trends and technologies is that the need to be agile for procurement may or may not fit with an existing process within a transportation agency. So the examples that we have are from San Diego Association of Governments, or SANDAG, on how they use their multimodal corridor plans to identify programs, policies, and projects that are focused on connectivity for all users. Northern Virginia Transportation Authority, NVTA, they have a transportation technology strategic plan that's highlighted. Is specifically outlining agency roles and responsibilities. Focused on external collaboration, there's an example from the city of Tucson, Arizona, on how they established a committee of more than 10 agency representatives to help oversee their Complete Streets initiatives for its street design guide. And then from a procurement standpoint, especially thinking about data, big data, Eastern Transportation Coalition has a transportation data marketplace that identifies pre-qualified vendors for specific categories of transportation data. Once we get into the systems context, this is really, I feel like, where the rubber meets the road in understanding an agency's baseline in terms of what technology, what infrastructure do you already have in place to implement some of these emerging trends and technologies and to create these new services, and an understanding
Hey, Nick or Joe, are you there?
Yes, looks like Carrie froze.
Yeah.
So might give her a couple seconds, but I mean I can take over need or is Dennis on?
Yes, I'm here.
Dennis. Okay. You want to continue where Carrie left off?
Let's see. Um, she was talking about at the systems content level,
Yeah,
context level.
correct.
Okay. So this, we're, looking at, the technology data and interfaces, um, and then going on to the operational context. Oh, there's Carrie.
Gary,
You're
you're
muted.
unmuted.
Yeah, you're on mute, Carrie.
Oh, well, sorry about that. That's an interesting glitch coming in for emerging trends and technologies on the webinar. Pardon me for that. Um, Thanks, Dennis. So yeah, just thinking about this systems context, we have another example from Manatee County, Florida, where they have enhanced existing traveler information systems by incorporating crowdsourced data from Google and Waze as part of a bi-directional data exchange agreement. Finally, in the operations context, we have plays related to, again, leveraging existing capabilities and developing approaches for pilot projects and monitoring and adjusting deployment. I think that the last two are so important. There are a number of opportunities, especially with grants and other seed money, to have demonstration or pilot projects. And so this really, I think, gives a good framework for understanding how to develop an approach for pilot projects, how to evaluate to either scale or replicate the pilot in other areas. And then I think with any TSMO deployment, it's so important to monitor the results and are things happening as intended? And if not, why not? And what can you do to adjust the deployment? So we have some examples both for the pilot approach from the Los Angeles Department of Transportation for how they identify pilot locations and implemented special operation zones. And then from the North Dakota Department of Transportation for how their coordination operations to max. Book are
Joe or Dennis, it looks like we lost
Yeah,
Carrie
yeah,
again.
we lost Carrie again. Yeah. Hey, Dennis, you want to take over?
Um, I don't have her slide notes. That's the problem with that. Um, just a second here.
We're at the operations context and going over monitor and deployment, and then up next will be the presentation from the city of Bellevue. So, Joe, we
Um,
could always move into that if we'd like, and allow
Yeah,
Carrie
let's
to
go ahead.
finish up.
Yeah,
yeah, let's do
let's
that.
go ahead and transition into the presentation from Bellevue.
Okay,
Thanks.
well, welcome Daniel A. and Kirk Nybert of City of Bellevue to walk through their presentation.
Great. Well, thanks for having us. My name is Daniel Lai. I'm the Smart Mobility Manager at the City of Bellevue. I'm joined by my colleague Kirk Nybert, who is our Transportation Technology Partnerships Manager. And today we're going to highlight the work on our real-time traffic signal safety intervention project as part of our US DOT SMART grant. Next slide here. So Bellevue, we have a smart mobility vision that uses innovation and partnerships to deploy emerging technologies that enhance safety, sustainability, efficiency, and accessibility of Bellevue's transportation system. Next slide. And I'll share a little bit more about our background. Technology has been part and parcel of what we do at Bellevue. We are a very unique city in the sense that we have reached 100% adaptive signal control. This is a journey that we began in 2016, or we reached 100% adaptive in 2016, but it was about a 15-year journey for the city to get to that state. This system is accompanied by a 10 gigabit high-speed fiber optic network that connects all of our traffic signals with the City Hall servers. Now, this really gives us the capability to pilot, prototype, and advance different modes of sensors. On the right here, you see an example of where we've integrated LiDAR sensors and camera technology with our signal system to be able to look at all the interactions between pedestrians, vehicles, buses, bicycles on the roadways, and be able to really make informed decisions about traffic signal control in different high-risk engagements. Next slide here. So this journey for us in video analytics and cloud computing and AI really began back in 2016 after the deployment of Adaptive. We partnered with Microsoft Research, headquartered in Redmond, Washington, as a neighbor to us to really look at the capabilities of video analytics. Here in this slide, you were able to see some of the early fruits of that labor where we were able to see pedestrians, vehicles, buses, bicycles. And at the time, it was very much for the purpose of data collection, very much to look at counting vehicles, also looking at near miss movements. Very little to do with real-time interventions at the time and how we would apply these different data points towards actionable measures in the field. But very useful. We use this data a lot to train the different video analytics models to be able to develop to the maturity that they are today. Next slide. So based on all of those learns, we applied these similar principles to different video analytics projects. Here is one where you see a cloud-based solution that we worked with a vendor on to automatically flag different anomalous movements at an intersection. So the idea here is that with the video analytics that we're able to consume and share, we can look at movements that happen throughout the course of the day, with the blue lines representing those that are common movements, constituting hundreds, if not thousands of movements over time. And the red lines depicting those that are anomalous movements, maybe even illegal movements that are restricted at an intersection. So the idea here is that the system would be able to automatically compute these anomalous movements and surface them for further triage, further analysis, or studies that an engineering department or a traffic engineering department may want to take on. Next slide. And so this slide here shows that system deployed here. There's a video clip that isn't working today, but what it's highlighting in this graphical user interface is a vehicle on the bottom right screen here. You see an image of our camera with a red box on the right corner. That vehicle is being tracked. This vehicle ends up making an illegal maneuver at the intersection. This system allows us to play back all of these instances where there is an anomalous movement, and then we can then use these different clips to figure out if there is an engineering solution or if there is any further study or effort that needs to be undertaken to course correct here. Next slide. And that then led us to our 2023-2024 Edge Computing Partnership. This is where, yet again, we applied a lot of our learns and principles to being able to understand what happens in all of the complex interactions at an intersection. So with this, we partnered with a LiDAR vendor. The LiDAR imagery is what you see on the right. The traffic camera footage is what you see on the left. And if you click play here, Adam, you'll be able to see the two synchronize with each other, where we are able to see the different movements from all the different modes. But most importantly here, we're looking at the pedestrian modes, crossing the crosswalk on the left here. We are able to see the state of occupancy, whether it's vacant or occupied. And more than that, we can also see the speed of pedestrian crossing and also the occupants in the crosswalk as well. Next slide here. So that really led us to another opportunity in 2023 where we applied for a SMART grant, and my colleague Kirk will talk more about this opportunity here.
Great. Thank you, Daniel. Yeah, so as Daniel just described, those earlier pilots and projects, they really set the stage for where we are today. We wanted to take the next step where we could leverage our adaptive signaling to actually move the needle on safety for our most vulnerable road users. And that's really where the SMART grant comes into play. So for those who aren't familiar with it, SMART stands for Strengthening Mobility and Revolutionizing Transportation. It's a U.S. Department of Transportation program, and it's specifically designed to fund the planning and prototyping of these kinds of innovative tech-heavy projects. Their ultimate goal is to find solutions that not only work in local agencies like Bellevue, but it can be scaled or replicated in cities across the country. So in 2023, we were awarded $1.43 million in stage 1 funding with a period of performance that runs through September of this year. And this grant is what is powering our RTSSI project, which is short for Real-Time Traffic Signal Safety Interventions. And we're using it to test 5 critical use cases that I'll walk you through shortly. Next slide, please. So the FY23 SMART Grant program focused on 8 key technologies, and we specifically honed in on smart sensors and traffic signals. Because again, we wanted to build directly on top of the adaptive infrastructure that Daniel just talked about. So by integrating smart sensors with our existing traffic signals, we're moving past just managing the flow of cars, and we're starting to treat the intersection as an intelligent environment that actually sees and responds to every single person using it. Next slide, please. So while adaptive signal technology allows us to efficiently manage vehicular traffic in Bellevue, we still face a pretty grim reality at our signalized intersections. And the stats on this slide are exactly why this project matters. So over half, 52% of our fatal and serious injury crashes are happening at signalized intersections. And 51% of these crashes involve a vulnerable road user, basically anyone outside of a vehicle. 41% of the pedestrian fatalities we see actually involve a failure to yield by a vehicle. So the common denominator here is clear. Our vulnerable road users are really at the highest risk. And while traditional signals are great at moving cars, they aren't always responsive to the real-time risks that people face when they're outside of a vehicle. And that's exactly what we're trying to fix with RTSSI. Next slide, please. So again, as Daniel talked about, the big opportunity we saw is from how the technology has evolved over the last few years. We finally have the processing power to do more than just record videos. We can now perform real-time interventions. So by processing data at the edge, meaning right there in the traffic cabinet, we can spot risk factors. We can intervene in milliseconds. So with our adaptive system and high-speed fiber already in place, we can implement and analyze the accuracy of use cases that really just weren't realistic in the past. And we're really now looking for what is a high impact shift. We want to move away from pedestrian phases that simply run on timers to an intersection that can see a mother with a stroller or a bicyclist and then adjust itself to keep them safe. So the next slide, we'll look at the actual solution system components. So on the left side of this slide, these are our sensors. So we're using a mix of high-def video and LiDAR, which lets the system know exactly where the users are in relation to the signal by ingesting SAE J2735 signal phase and timing messages. And then we have an edge computing device right in the traffic cabinet, and this is identifying the type of user, their speed, their trajectory, all in real time. It's constantly asking, is a qualifying event happening, such as a pedestrian still in the crosswalk as the walk phase time is running out. And when that trigger happens, the edge device will then send a signal through detector inputs to the traffic controller, and the controller is what's running the logic to intervene. Maybe it's extending a walk phase or it's turning on a no right turn sign. But again, only if the signal phase allows it to happen safely. Go to the next slide. So for the RTSSI pilot project, we picked 7 intersections that we're trying to represent a mix of high volume and high risk areas in Bellevue. Our crossroads in Victoria areas. They're dense, diverse neighborhoods with a ton of pedestrian activity. And then we added 2 locations in downtown Bellevue to test the solutions in a higher density urban core that had really complex movements. We're live testing several use cases at these spots. We're focusing on protecting people in the crosswalk or restricting vehicle moves like right turns on red, left turn phasing. So let's see what this actually looks like on the ground. If we can go to the next slide. So the first use case that we'll talk about is our pedestrian extension use case. And this is for the moments when that walk sign ends, but someone hasn't really reached the other side of the crosswalk yet. So if you look at the diagrams on the right, A1, that's your standard walk start. A2 is when the walk phase countdown begins with our sensors identifying anyone who still may be in the crosswalk. And then A3 is the actual intervention. So even though the signal now says don't walk, the sensors recognize that there is still someone who hasn't cleared the crosswalk. So the traffic controller is going to hold the vehicle signals in red until they're safely on the curb. So why does this matter? I mean, this directly hits the number 1 cause of exposure. It's being caught in the crosswalk when traffic starts moving. It's about protecting our seniors, protecting our families who may just need a few more seconds to cross. It really turns a high-risk intersection into more of a responsive one. So let's go to the next slide, and we have a video that shows, why just having a static walk timer just isn't enough. So if you can cue the video, if you look in the upper left, you'll see a couple with a dog. This dog is very excited. He's got a ball, he's ready to go. The walk phase is already on, but the couple is still on the curb. They're just trying to get their dog under control. So they don't even step into the street until the countdown is well underway. And they're crossing, and then right here, the dog loses his ball into traffic. They have to wrangle him, they have to pull him back. Now watch the signal. The pedestrian phase ends while they're still in the intersection. But because our sensors are tracking them, the RTSSI system intervenes. It holds the red light. It gives them those extra seconds to clear the lane before the conflicting phase vehicles are released to go through. Again, it's just a great example of how the system adapts to real-world unpredictability. Let's go to the next slide. So our second use case is what we call walk extension. And while the previous ped extension use case had added time at the end of the phase, here the walk extension is more proactive. It's adding time right at the beginning. Again, looking at the diagrams here, A1 shows that we provide an initial 7 seconds of walk time when that walk phase starts. But now our sensors are counting everyone entering the crosswalk, as well as detecting the speed that they're moving across. So A2 shows that if the sensors see a large group, like a crowd of pedestrians who may have just gotten off a bus and are trying to cross, or if they see someone who might be using a mobility device who may need extra time, we can immediately bump that 7-second walk display up to 15 or even 20 seconds. And then in A3, again, the point here is that we're trying to ensure that everyone has time to actually get into the crosswalk before the countdown even starts. And this matters because now seniors or families with strollers or using mobility devices, they don't feel rushed or left behind the moment they step off the curb. There's no button pushing required. The technology just adapts to the needs of the pedestrians. So if we go to the next slide, we can look at a video demonstrating this use case. So on the left is it's a standard camera view of a couple crossing with one using a walker, and on the right is the same intersection is depicted by a synchronized LiDAR point cloud. So the important thing here is what the system is doing with that LiDAR data. It's not just classifying the objects it sees, it's calculating their walking speed in real time. And because of the mobility device, this couple is moving a little bit slower than average. And once the system detects they're below a certain speed threshold, it then tells the controller to extend that walk signal. So what you may have seen in the video, we had the couple, when they enter the video, they had 7 seconds. We see that they're walking a little bit slower, and we've actually extended that to 15 seconds. So again, it's just ensuring that they aren't met with a flashing countdown while they're still in the first few feet of the crosswalk, and it's a much safer, less pressured experience. We go to the next slide. So use case 3 is what we call our dynamic no right turn on red use case. And this hits that common conflict where right turning drivers are looking left for a gap in traffic, and they may fail to see pedestrians who are entering your crosswalk from their right. So instead of a permanent no right turn sign, we installed dynamically actuated blank out signs at our pilot intersections. So in A1, when we detect that there's a significant number of people waiting to cross, it triggers a restriction. And we're currently using 5 pedestrians as our threshold number, but if there are less than 4 people waiting to cross, the sign stays off to avoid any unnecessary delays for drivers. And then A2 shows that once the walk phase starts, we actuate the sign and it prohibits right turns into the path of pedestrians who may be getting ready to cross. And this matters because it's really about data-driven safety. It builds legitimacy because drivers don't see that the sign is only on, drivers see that the sign is only on when there's a valid need for it. It removes the guesswork and it keeps pedestrians from having to compete with turning cars. So we go to the next slide. Again, I have a video and I'll set it up. So there's a lot happening in this video. So again, we have the same split screen with video on the left, and we've got the LiDAR point cloud on the right. Can you pause it 1 second, please? Or actually just reset it to the beginning. Yeah, so I want to kind of like explain what's going on here. So it's a little hard to see, but on the video side, you'll see that we have a blank out sign located in the upper right part of the intersection, and right now it's off. But you'll see that there's a white car approaching down below on the right with the intention of making a right turn. And again, now if we look at the LiDAR view on the right, here you can see the system has counted 5 pedestrians waiting. You can't even see all the 5 pedestrians on the video, but you can see them with LiDAR. We've got 3 pedestrians on the right-hand side, 2 pedestrians on the left-hand side waiting to cross, and that's our threshold. So now if we cue the video, as we start the video, you can see that the white car has gotten there just before the walk phase. They've turned safely. But immediately after, as the walk phase starts, the system triggers the sign. And the next vehicle approaching down below this red car, it sees the restriction, the blank out sign is now on, and it has to wait, so it lets all 5 pedestrians cross without any conflict. And we don't show it on this video, but when the number of waiting pedestrians drop back below our threshold, then the sign goes blank again. It's really a surgical intervention. We only restrict that right turn when we detect the potential of a high-risk conflict. I'm going to the next slide. Yep, we can go to the next slide. Yeah, okay, so this next use case is what we call dynamic left turn phasing. And this one is about that judgment call that you have to make when you see those flashing yellow left turn arrows. And in this case, our sensors are performing real-time gap calculations of oncoming traffic. So if there are safe, consistent gaps, usually more than 7 seconds, then we can keep the signal in its permissive phase. And that's represented by the flashing yellow arrow. We let the driver decide when they want to make that left-hand turn. But if that gap gets too small or too unpredictable, then we dynamically switch to a protected phase. We're either going to make that solid green arrow solid for a protected left, or we can change it to a solid red arrow that restricts the left turn until those gaps in oncoming traffic improve to the safer levels. And this is about reducing the cognitive load on the driver. We're trying to take, again, the guesswork out of whether a gap is big enough so we can maximize throughput when it's quiet, but prioritize safety when it's busy. So those are the primary use cases we've been piloting, but the big question is it actually working? And to walk you through what the data is telling us so far and share some of the results from our initial validation, I'm going to hand it back over to Daniel.
Great. Thank you, Kirk. So yeah, we were able to partner with the Insurance Institute of Highway Safety here, and really great partner in this project to help us to evaluate efficacy and accuracy and whether that we're even moving the needle here relative to safety, because that was the core mission of this project. And so what you're seeing on this slide here is a bunch of dots on the left and a bunch of dots that are depicted in blue and a bunch of dots that are depicted in pink here. The main thing that I want to draw your attention to is that pre-intervention, many of the dots were much higher on the scale, meaning that there were many more near miss interactions than post interaction or post intervention. And we saw this across all 5 intersections that we studied, some more than others, but generally the theme here is that we saw a consistent reduction. And for the two that we have currently evaluated in the preliminary study, we saw 42.9% reduction in the dynamic no right turn on red use case, and then another roughly 52% reduction in the walk extension use case. So we're seeing a lot of promise. We continue to study and evaluate these use cases. We are set out to deliver our final report to the US DOT in September, where many of these results will be refined and evaluated at a higher level of rigor as well. Next slide. This project also helped us to build confidence that some of the core competencies in being able to discern and detect pedestrians and vehicle interactions leads us to the hypothesis that there may be other use cases as well that might add safety, might complement what we're doing as well. So this very specific one that we are highlighting here is called a dynamic leading pedestrian interval. It's the notion of having a head start for pedestrians in the concurrent phase where the vehicles might run. Those that are familiar with this treatment that has been utilized across the nation typically provides 3 to 5 seconds head start for the pedestrian crossing. But in this example, we are moving away from that 5 seconds being a static number or static quantity of time. What we're doing is we are also assessing that pedestrian's placement in the crosswalk against where the projected right turning vehicle wheel path might be. And so the condition here is that it's either 5 seconds or when that pedestrian has departed that zone of influence or that high risk area we might attribute to that movement as well. So that movement or that LPI is now dynamic in the sense that we won't lift it until that pedestrian has departed. Next slide. So we've learned a lot from this project. A lot of this was very novel when we first began the project, but we've definitely learned a lot, also determined core competencies in many of these different modes of technology or different forms of technology. But I think what's important to highlight is how do we take this and apply best practices as we continue advancing the state of practice. And so the first bullet here is we feel like there needs to be this constant engagement between cross-disciplinary partners, and this needs to happen early. We need to involve different stakeholders, be it our IT departments, traffic engineering, community members, this really cross-functional teams that are anticipating different challenges together, helping to accelerate solutions and build public trust, right? A lot of this technology is new, a lot of questions raised about privacy and transparency, which leads me to the next bullet here. And we really want to reinforce that the way that we design these systems and data flows really are not collecting any PII of any nature. All of it is anonymous. We are using it to proactively publish different privacy policies that help to inform the public of how are we being good stewards of these technologies and data formats that we receive. And then we really want to test innovation with live demos and with a feedback loop as well. Many of these use cases are new. We are very engaged in these different presentation settings where we are intaking feedback from others that are listening to the work and following the work that we are doing, helping us to inform different policy making in the future. Even variables like operational variables that you heard Kirk describe, many of these lend themselves to further studies, further refinement on how we might change the state of practice as well. And then the next bullet here is to really gather integration issues and share guidelines as well. We really want to look at sensor placement, network connectivity, timing mismatches, different anomalies that we may see, like headlights that may be falsely detected as pedestrians as well. How do we course correct when we noticed these different anomalies as well? And ultimately, we want to create a how-to guide so that other peer agencies can benefit from our learnings, also apply similar principles where it's beneficial. And the key takeaway here is, we want to make this future-ready traffic technology We want to make this about collaboration and transparency, where agencies that really dive into this work early can test openly, share the learns that we have together, and set the standard for how this technology could be deployed across the nation as well. And with that, that wraps up our presentation for today. I think Kirk and I have some time for questions and answers.
Thank you, Kirk and Daniel. We do have time for Q&A. So as a reminder, please put those in the question and answer pod, which can be found at the bottom of your screen. And you may have to click on the three dots for more to type those in. The first question that we have is, with the extension of the walk signal, could people just keep stepping off the curb to keep extending the walk time, or is there a limit for how long the walk signal can be extended?
Yeah, I mean, I could take that, Daniel. So we do recognize the potential that people could try to game the system when they realize what's happening. So there is a limit to how long we'll extend that walk extension. And again, that's kind of what we're doing these pilots, where we're testing all the different parameters. So right now we'll extend that walk signal from 7 seconds to either 15 or 20 seconds. And we're trying again, to see what is the sweet spot to how long we do it. But there is, yeah, we definitely won't do it longer than that. So, ultimately, we hope that pedestrians who see this will understand that, okay, there's a limited time when they'll be able to cross.
Thank you. And another question about, are there any concerns about liability for incidents occurring in the intersection?
I can take this one, Kirk. Yeah, the way we thought it, we get asked this question quite often, and the way we think about it is we're comparing against status quo, right? Status quo right now is we do nothing, right? The pedestrian pushes the button, it's a static amount of time, no extra time. It's not sensitive to demand, right? So everything that we do here is additive, right? It's an enhancement to the current state of practice, right? And the worst that can happen in these scenarios is maybe we didn't see that walking device and that additional device or that additional time wasn't granted, right? But we would never do less than what is programmed in the signal as a baseline, which follows and adheres to MUTCD still.
Thank you. Another question is, how have you made changes to the implementation as you've learned during the deployment?
Yeah, we've made a lot of changes, I would say. The one use case that Kirk highlighted with the dynamic no right turn on red, in actuality, that's not how we started that use case. In the very, very early days of this project, it was based on calculating a cross product between conflicting pedestrians and right turning vehicles and seeing that over several cycles and then activating the no right turn on red use or restriction. But we found that to be not very proactive and not very predictable as to when it would happen as well. And it really departed from sort of the nature or the essence of this project where we wanted it to be real time. So we then went back to the drawing board and we came up with this new methodology where we look at the waiting peds, and there's an element of detecting intention as well at the corners of the intersection, and to be able to apply that intention towards the next phase in what happens in the walk cycle. So really a good example of where we changed our method of operation based on what we were seeing and what we were learning.
Thank you. And another question about, do you plan to expand this to other intersections? And do you see that it could be deployed at a wider scale across your system?
Yeah, I can take that one, Daniel. So when we talk about the SMART grant, stage one, the funding that we got was for prototyping and developing solutions. And then the SMART program, stage two, is a larger amount of funding that allows for scalability once you've proven the efficacy of the solution. Unfortunately, the USDOT has now repurposed those funds, so we don't have the stage two funding available for us anymore. But that said, we are looking at different funding opportunities, different grant opportunities, working with different parts of the federal government. We would like to extend this to other locations throughout the city. We want to continue. The data demonstrates that we are making significant improvements. So the idea is that we can get some additional federal money and then be able to maybe not throughout. We have 220 intersections in Bellevue, so it's doubtful that we would be able to fund the entire intersection. But again, where our high injury network is, we want to look at putting the technology into those locations.
Have you just a follow up on that? Have you uh, created like a wish list or an order in which you'd like to expand based on these injuries, and how does that work?
We have actually, again, we have a high injury network that kind of shows where most of the fatalities and serious injuries are. So those would be our priority. There's probably, a subset of the 220 where we'd look to implement that.
And then we have another question. What are some of your initial parameters in triggering the dynamic flashing yellow arrow? How do you transition between the protected and the permitted in real time?
Yeah, I can answer this one, Kirk. So yeah, we definitely thought a lot about this operation and put together sort of a concept of operations for it, where obviously we don't want it going back and forth all the time. There's an element of driver expectancy, right? So what we do is we continually measure the gap time that Kirk described, but we calculate that based on a 5 minute running average. And we will then alter the state of operation based on whether the gap within the last running 5 minutes was either greater or less than 7 seconds. And that's what informs the protected and permissive state of operation. So while it is real time, it does sort of have, it could potentially have a 5 minute delay because we are looking for that average over a 5 minute period because we want to, if we're going to turn it on, we also want that operation to be in effect for at least a minimum amount of time, again, for the purposes of driver expectancy.
That makes sense. I'm going to ask one more question. I encourage you all to continue to put questions in the Q&A pod, but just with an eye on time, I want to be able to turn it over to AJ. But before I do, can you talk about what data are retained, what is discarded after real-time decisions are made? And what data do you keep and go back and evaluate to continue to tweak the system?
So for the purposes of testing right now, every time that an intervention is placed, the signal system flags what timestamp it occurred at. Within the actual detection systems itself, we also have the capability to do uh, a specific recording for that event as well. And that helps us to evaluate because we can look at the time that the time when the signal actually received that intervention and then correlate it with what the actual sensor system saw at the time, right? And so that allows us to do a lot of our evaluation studies right now. Now, going into the future in a production state, I'm not sure that, we would record the same level of video evidence of these sensor and interventions at play. But we still have a lot of logs in the background that would tell us, hey, that exactly 10:54, there was a walk extension that was placed on Ped Walk 2 at Bellevue Way and Northeast 8th. We are able to go back into the logs and see that.
Very interesting. Well, thank you both for your presentation. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to AJ O'Connor with TriMet.
Hello, I am AJ O'Connor. I am the Director of Intelligent Transportation Systems at TriMet, which is the regional mass transit provider for the Portland metro region. I'm going to talk about transit signal priority and specifically how we are transitioning from one of the very first transit signal priority systems to a modern cloud-based or next-gen transit signal priority system. And I might use those terms interchangeably, next-gen or cloud-based. Just so you're aware, I'm not talking about two different things. If I do that, I have a bad habit of that. Next slide, please. So I'm going to provide just a brief overview of what TSP is for those that might not know. It really is a communication system between the traffic signal and the buses to reduce bus delay, usually by shortening the red cycle or extending the green. And TriMet and the City of Portland, the Portland Bureau of Transportation, was one of the first major transit agencies to do TSP in the 90s. And we had implemented that completely in our service area. Next slide, please. And it is a win for most everyone involved, especially as we have gone to the cloud-based version. As you'll see later, we have proven with our first implementation of cloud-based TSP that it has not resulted in any delays for pedestrians or cyclists. And we have documented proof that it has reduced our greenhouse gas emissions, and it has improved the reliability on our corridor and our speed. Next slide, please. So to understand the transition and from this emerging technology, I need to explain a little bit about the old technology. So the legacy system that we implemented in the 90s added an optical infrared emitter on the bus. An optical detector was added to each traffic signal that was integrated into the signal controller in the cabinet. And as I said, we implemented this completely across TriMet's region. The disadvantage of this system, although it was cutting edge in the 90s, is it really relies on line of sight. That request from the bus for priority only happens within the range of the infrared signal. Next slide, please. And there's drawbacks to that. It requires that the detectors are regularly cleaned and ranged. They move over time, so there was a fair amount of maintenance required from our regional traffic partners. And as you can imagine, in Portland, Oregon, it rains a lot, and sometimes the detection didn't work. The other big drawback of this system is getting performance data and on how it was actually performing was tedious at best. So those were the challenges we had. Next slide, please. So what is the difference with a next gen or a cloud-based TSP system? We're no longer relying on that infrared optics. We're relying on information that TriMet was already collecting for our CAD AVL system, which is computer-aided dispatch automatic vehicle location system, and which most major transit agencies and even medium-sized transit agencies now have as standard on their buses. And the new system sends basically all that information to our cloud-based partner, which in our case is Light. And it gave us an enormous amount of data that the transit agency and our regional traffic partners were not able to really get out of the old system. And to be clear, we're running a hybrid right now between the old and the new. We're slowly going to be transitioning over to complete cloud-based system over a number of years. Next slide, please. So this diagram is basically showing how, in a very simple graphic, how it communicates status. The TriMet, we have a private Verizon network that is on all buses that transmits all the data that we know about that bus to the Light system, the cloud service. And the Light system then provides highly accurate estimated time of arrivals to each signal. And the major jump in functionality with the cloud-based or next-gen TSP system is it's not that line of sight request. The traffic signal knows when that bus is going to arrive 3 signals ahead. So it allows that traffic signal controller to modify and run different phases and prepare that intersection for that bus to arrive. So hopefully it's arriving on green, or if it's arriving on red, it's a very short red. Next slide, please. So what does it require? I've talked about it a little bit to begin with. So the transit agency needs to have a modern CAD AVL system that's on board. As you can see from the graphic, this system can also be used for school buses and emergency vehicles in the very same fashion. So you have a modern CAD AVL system on board with a cellular connection and accurate GPS that's transmitting everything that we would be sending to our operations command center for dispatch also now goes to the light cloud. And from there, the light cloud determines estimated time of arrivals, like I had said, and passes it to the traffic controller. Our regional traffic partners need a modern ATC controller. We need high-speed data connection from that controller to the signal. And we need some new cybersecurity measures, which I'll talk about in a minute. The light system really needs just those high-speed connections and one small device that you see there titled the Light Maestro, which is essentially an Intel NUC device that sits in the regional traffic partners data center. It is a piece of hardware right now, but it can be virtualized later if required. The other item that you'll see under light that is available, the light portal or dashboard, is available to the transit agency and all regional traffic partners that allows everyone to see the current status and health of the system live, and also is where we can access all kinds of data on how the system has actually been performing. Next slide, please. So one of the questions that we immediately got asked when we started this project was, how are you going to make this secure? Because when we come into a regional traffic partner and say, this light cloud system has all these benefits, we're going to be able to collect all this data, we're going to be able to provide estimated time of arrivals much sooner than we had before. And we have to put this little device into your data center and connect it to the internet. A lot of people go, whoa, 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 you're not going to do that. So we had to prove that we could be completely cyber secure. And this was one of the very first challenges that we encountered. And what we did is essentially put a firewall on either side of the Maestro. And not just only put the firewall there. So the first firewall that talks to light via the internet only allows that device to talk to light and vice versa, nothing else. And then of greater importance to the regional traffic providers that we worked with was to ensure that the Maestro could only send certain commands or requests to the individual traffic controllers. So we worked with Palo Alto, who was our firewall provider, to create what they refer to as a threat signature, but it's essentially a filter that only allows NTCIP communication, which is the primary communication protocol to traffic controllers through that firewall. And it's even a subset of NTCIP. So we had to go through extensive testing with our regional traffic partners and essentially demonstrate that that was the only messages getting through to those traffic controllers. So that was one of the major challenges. Next slide, please. And once we were able to do that, we implemented it on this corridor, which stretches from downtown Portland on the left through the inner southeast section of Portland, which is highly dense and lots of pedestrians, to outer southeast Portland and Gresham. Gresham is a suburb of Portland where it's much more of a typical suburb, less dense. So totally two different applications on this one corridor. This corridor was our first bus rapid transit implementation and is what prompted the advancement to the cloud-based TSP system over the old infrared legacy system. When this was being planned, the question was asked, do we just want to continue with the old legacy system? And the answer was no, we need to move something new. We made that decision and then started to look for funds, and completely coincidentally, was not planned. It was lucky happenstance that the Oregon Department of Transportation was going for an ATC MDT grant from the Federal Highways Administration, and we were able to be part of that grant, requesting funds for the next gen TSP system, and luckily we're selected. So thank you, FHWA, for funding this first implementation. And part of that implementation and grant requirement required us to do a before and after study. But since this was a BRT system, we were changing the entire route pretty considerably, moving bus stops, completely redoing bus stops, completely redoing intersections. So there really wasn't a fair comparison for before or after. So to meet the qualifications of the quote unquote before and after study required by the grant, we essentially turned off TSP for a period of time, and studied the results when we turned it back on. And it was pretty stunning. It was pretty obvious. And the impact when we turned on this route was very immediate. You can see the amount of improvement in travel time that occurred. The number 2 division you see listed there, that was the line prior to the next gen TSP system. So the result of the cloud-based TSP system is that we had more reliable running times, faster running times, and it was right from the very beginning was a huge success. Next slide, please. And one of the aspects of the study that we looked at, and we hired an outside traffic engineering firm that had nothing to do with the BRT project or the next gen cloud TSP system to do that study. And they looked at all the data that Light was collecting, what TriMet had collected, and then used INRIX data, determined that essentially it was negligible impact on motor vehicles, and which was a major concern of a lot of people when we first implemented this. So it was a huge success in that regard as well. Next slide, please. And moving forward, back to the planning and institutional context, TriMet has labeled our internal group Better Bus, where we are working with all our regional traffic partners and through our MPO to identify projects where we can improve transit reliability, speed, and capacity, and have identified a group of projects where we will continue to try and roll out the next gen cloud TSP. And one thing to note is our better bus though is viewing emerging technologies like cloud-based TSP and other systems as just one tool to increase transit reliability and speed. And better bus also includes physical changes like bus-only lanes, things of that nature. Next slide, please. Oh, I should have had this. Should have been talking to this slide. This is just showing the toolkit that of items that are in use to improve transit, and highlighted is TSP as we've been talking. On the Division Transit project line that I have been talking primarily about, there was more than just TSP. We also had queue jump signals that were part of that implementation. Next slide, please. So this is just an example here of what we have lined up next. The line 33 is a fairly long line that is going to be implementing TSP. That is probably the next major. We also are identifying small spot projects and intersections where we can add the cloud-based TSP or queue jumps. And one of the big factors and changes with the cloud-based TSP system is, as you can see, we have many different agencies listed here. Counties, Tigard and Gresham are suburbs of Portland. Hillsborough is also a suburb of Portland. So we have cities and counties that are all working together to implement these projects. And the cloud-based TSP system has required a much greater level of cooperation among the agencies and TriMet, the transit agency. We were lucky that the region had already standardized on a central signal system. So everybody in our region is using Q-Free as their central signal system, with a couple minor exceptions. And the modern ATC controllers that are going in are all Q-Free. So implementing TSP in new locations, just having one traffic controller vendor and central signal system to integrate with helps tremendously. And I think that is my last slide, and I'm open to questions. And I realize I didn't put my email in the last slide, so I will put it in the chat so that if anybody has any other questions that don't get answered today, feel free to message me and happy to answer them.
Thank you, AJ. I certainly encourage anyone to put questions in the Q&A pod so that we can get to those. Starting off, so you were mentioning that having the, one vendor standardized signal system makes it easier to implement. What other advice would you give an agency interested in implementing cloud-based TSP?
I think one of the reasons we were successful is our MPO has a subcommittee that we call Transport that consists of, and Dennis Mitchell, who's headed that for many years, who's on this webinar. That committee consists of basically all the regional traffic agencies in the area. And that subcommittee was where we were able to have the discussions about moving to the next gen or cloud-based TSP system, where we voted as a region that was where we were going to go as a region, so that everybody was on board at the start conceptually with moving to that system. Additionally, it has fostered collaboration amongst the different traffic agencies in terms of how new versions of their central signal system and new versions of the controller software from Q-Free are tested and validated before they go into production. So I think the key point is really trying to establish a forum or a way to have this dialogue across all kinds of counties and cities at once, instead of the individual transit agency or the individual traffic agency having to try and do that one by one. So using the MPO was really key.
Thanks. That's really helpful. And I think Dennis was also noting that for this, other than having ATCs and the local agencies communication network, you don't need additional new hardware in the field.
That is correct. There's no new hardware in the field. We use the traffic agency's existing network to send our request to that traffic controller. And from the transit agency side, since we're using the existing CAD AVL system, there's nothing new to add to the bus either.
I think that's great, especially when it comes to some of these. So I feel like sometimes the emerging technologies are more expensive. And so it's nice to think about integrating something that doesn't require additional hardware in the field. What have you seen any, or have you had any challenges with regard to staff capacity, or what's really required on TriMet's end to deploy and maintain this compared to legacy systems?
From the transit agency's perspective, there's not a huge impact on staff time for maintaining this. Essentially, if you had staff maintaining the CAD AVL system, you are going to be able to maintain TSP, because basically what we are doing is sending a separate message to the cloud TSP provider with all the data that we know about that bus. What's its schedule? Is it on time? How many people does it have on that bus, etc. But that we were already sending that to our operations command center. So it really does not have a huge impact on the transit agency. Regarding the traffic partners, it really depends on the level of how much they want to modify their controller software for TSP. Different cities have different modal priorities. So the city of Portland, I think, is very akin to the city of Bellevue in trying to prioritize pedestrian and bicycle traffic. So their traffic engineers require a little bit more complicated routines in the traffic controller software than some of the other cities who are not prioritizing pedestrian and cyclists as much. So it's a little bit more work probably for the traffic agencies implementing it than the transit agency for sure. I see the question, does it require a bus-only lane? No, it does not. They're and they are the accuracy of the GPS and the ETA is so accurate that I don't believe we've had to. I'm trying to think if we've had to add any additional detection at any intersections, and I don't believe we have. Dennis, correct me if I have that wrong. And I've been really remiss. One thing I forgot to mention in terms of the real benefits on those ETAs and why they're so highly accurate is that Light is using machine learning, which is a form of AI, and they learn over time how a bus normally operates in that corridor, and it takes into account for their ETAs things like Monday through Friday at 3:30, the school at this location lets out. Therefore, the dwell times for stops around that school are longer for the buses, and they then modify the ETAs during that time period. And our vendor had told us that it takes about 3 months of data and their machine learning algorithm to really dial in the ETAs. And that was proven. Like I said, it was a success from the day we turned it on, but the difference between the start date and 3 months later was pretty dramatic.
Thanks, AJ. I do see a question in the Q&A pod. I can start with it and then turn it over to the other speakers to add on to this. And the question is, can the speakers say more about how these deployments and the playbook advanced TSMO programs, not the deployments or individual strategies? From the playbook standpoint, the goal is to have the two sides of the coin. One, to harness some of these emerging trends and technologies to improve systems management and operations, to improve how the system functions for all users. And of course, that requires with you have transit, you have bicycle, pedestrian, what we've talked about today. It certainly requires prioritization of users' needs on freeways or arterials. The flip side of that is also how TSMO programs might be put in place or be adapted to better react to different technologies that come into the market. And before I turn it over to the other speakers, I did want to also note that the playbook is accompanied by these illustrative case studies, both two of which were presented today on the cloud-based centralized transit signal priority and the real-time intersection safety interventions. There's also case studies on leveraging automated shuttles to support first and last mile transportation services, leveraging curb space management technologies and trends in an urbanized sub-area, and leveraging vehicle trajectory data to optimize signal retiming. So I think all of these play a part in how agencies can harness these technologies, trends, and services to improve operations. AJ, Daniel, Kirk, do you have anything to add to that?
I'm just trying to think if we do. No, I don't think I do.
No problem there at all. Just in closing, wanted to put another plug in for the playbook. I know it was cut off earlier by some technology failures, but I think that one of the greatest things about the playbook are the different discussion guides, checklists, and sample resources that really help agencies find their way in how they might integrate these emerging trends and technologies, whether it's something coming to you from the private sector that your area is having to react to and handle, or whether you're looking to some of these technologies like the real-time intersection safety interventions or the centralized transit signal priority to help optimize multimodal operations. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Nick, but one quick other question. Are there any suggestions on getting consensus agreement or uniform approaches across regions and stakeholders?
Yes, that was one of the challenges that we had. So what we started to do for IGAs, and I guess this ties into the question on maintenance and support. We started with sort of a general IGA that laid out what the transit agency was responsible for, what regional traffic partners would be responsible for. So, for example, TriMet has said we will pay for the licensing for the TSP system. We will pay a certain amount for the startup costs, and by that I mean like the original configuration of the controllers by the traffic agencies. And we developed items that we thought would apply to every single city or county that we are working with. And we started with that as a blueprint, and then we envisioned a project-based IGA that would get into more specific details if a specific city or county had any differences from the original IGA, and that's how we've handled it. So one of the projects that was listed on one of the last slides was the Line 33, which is a major extension of our cloud-based TSP system, and that is going to have separate IGAs that are slightly different than the general one that we started with for the Division Transit project. But in general, I would say it goes back to we're lucky enough to have this subcommittee of our MPO that encompasses all the regional traffic players, and we're able to have those discussions in those meetings, and that's been enormously helpful.
Great, thank you. Nick?
Okay, thank you. I guess we have another poll here.
I think this poll could inform some future research or other presentations that we might provide.
Okay, folks want to go ahead and just let us know what topics you're most interested in. That'd be great. We'll give it a few seconds here. Okay. Looks like there's interest in developing an approach for a pilot project and understanding the baseline data and leveraging existing capabilities. So I think that's something we could at some point follow up with. And Joe, I think you had mentioned early on that all this information will be available at some point. You're just kind of going through the final stages of making it available. Is that right?
That is correct. It's going through our final review process within FHWA. So hopefully we'll get this up online soon. And when I do, we'll let you all know.
Okay. All right. Well, I just want to take this opportunity to thank all of our participants, but I also want to thank all of our speakers. So Joe, Carrie, Daniel, Kirk, and AJ, thanks for all of your insight. This was some really great information, and we'll look forward to continuing the conversation in the future. And so that concludes our webinar for today. Thank you.